Welcome to Disturbing Comics, where we talk about the craziest comics. I found out about a very controversial look into the crimes of Jeffrey Dahmer. In March 1992, a month after Dahmer was in prison for his crimes, a very out-of-pocket comic was released retelling the murders Dahmer committed. Released by Boneyard Press, the unofficial biography caused uproar with both the victims' families and Dahmer's family. Hart D. Fisher is the guy who found Boneyard Press and was known as the most controversial comic book figure when this was created. Drawn by Al Hanford and Eric Knopf, this comic gets plenty facts wrong, so keep that in mind. Otherwise, I'll be reading the text since it's minimal and it's good for narrating, and I'll inject thoughts here and there. So if you want to see what happens, including all the messed up parts, stay tuned for the comic. Cue to Gohan. At 31 years old, he's one of the most talked about men of the decade, eclipsing movie stars, politicians, rock stars, and athletes. His name became synonymous with evil and perversion. The pathetic excuse for a human life form sitting on a prison bunk is Jeffrey Dahmer, a serial killer. Waiting in PC for his trial, Dahmer's only challenge is killing time. The hardcore cons call it Punk City or protective custody. Dahmer wouldn't last a New York minute in general population. Are the lowest rung of the ladder. A guard sits outside his cell making sure the killer doesn't take his own life, a waste of taxpayers' money. Both men avoid eye contact, one out of guilt, the other disgust. Stephen M. Hicks stood at 5'11" and 160 pounds. His fatal mistake was hitchhiking on the Cleve, Mass. Road and accepting a ride from 18-year-old Jeffrey Dahmer. The two went back to Dahmer's house for a few cold ones. Dahmer's parents were visiting relatives in Wisconsin at the time. Soon it would be time for his new buddy to go, but Dahmer didn't want him to. The dumbbell was the closest thing within reach. Now, young Jeffrey had a body to dispose of before his parents came home. Jeffrey tried the crawl space first. He dismembered the body and hid it in garbage bags under the house. After a few days in the summer heat, the body parts began to bake in the plastic bags, but within days he had dug them up in a panic. The burial wasn't enough. After peeling the flesh away, Dahmer smashed the bones with a sledgehammer and scattered the fragments from a rocky ledge behind his house. September 8th, 1986, Jeffrey Dahmer had been kicking back with a few cases of beers until he saw two 12-year-old boys. They told police that they had seen him with his pants and underwear pulled down, looking at them. Dahmer told the booking officer that he had done it before, a story he later denied. On March 10th, 1987, Jeffrey Dahmer was convicted of disorderly conduct. On September 15th, the killing began again, 8 years after his first taste. Stephen W. Twomey was the first, a 24-year-old short-order cook from Michigan. And then in January of 1988, Dahmer picked up a 14-year-old Native American boy from a street corner and killed him at his basement flat. Richard Duerero joined the party in the acid vat on March 24th. At 5'6" and 130 pounds, the dancer was no match for Jeffrey. Catherine Dahmer soon grew sick of her weird grandson and the strange chemical smells coming from his room. Dahmer moved into apartment 213 at 924 North 25th Street on September 25th, 1988. It was not the best of neighborhoods. The next day, he met a young Asian boy on the streets and offered him $50 to pose for some pictures. Dahmer offered the 13-year-old boy some coffee. The drugged coffee made him feel woozy. The dazed boy stumbled out of the door and fled to his nearby home. The Synthesophones took their boy to the hospital and called the police. Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested and charged with second-degree sexual assault and enticing a child for immoral purposes. Dahmer was released a week later on bail. Eddie Smith was living with his sister Caroline in a North Side duplex. I guess this guy is Eddie Smith, but I don't know if he actually did look like this in real life. In fact, I think he's black instead of white as we see here. On June 14, 1990, he told his sister he was going out to the clubs But he wouldn't stay out late. He wanted to march in Milwaukee's Gay Pride Parade. His body parts were never found, but his face was identified by Dahmer as one of his victims. Caroline filled out a missing persons report on June 23rd. The following April, she received a disturbing phone call. Don't bother looking for your brother. Why not? Because he's dead. How do you know that? Because I killed him. Phone died in her hands. Now, I was looking all over for sources that said that this phone call happened, but I just don't see Jeffrey Dahmer doing that at all. Maybe the Zodiac killer, but not Jeffrey Dahmer. Sunday, July 8th, outside a gay nightclub, Jeffrey Dahmer has just convinced a 15-year-old boy to pose for him. An offer of $200 was all it took. Ernest Miller, a 24-year-old dancer, found himself in Jeffrey's warm embrace. After sex came the drugged drink. Then Dahmer slit his throat and the camera came out. Dahmer bleached the bones and kept the man's skeleton. On February 18, 1991, Curtis Schroeder is running down the street beside Marquette University. He meets Jeffrey Dahmer in a three-sided bus shelter, sheets of rain pounding the glass enclosure. The 19-year-old youth with the high cheekbones never noticed the leather strap next to Dahmer's couch until it was around his neck. His skull sat next to some biceps and a six-pack in the fridge. So if you remember about a few frames ago, Dahmer had influenced a boy named Synthesophone to take pictures, and he escaped from Dahmer. And Dahmer was arrested, but he got out on bail. Surprisingly, Dahmer, just from pure coincidence, met the older brother of that boy, Konarak Synthesophone. He got Konarak to pose in his underwear, unaware of the dead man in the next room. Dahmer gives the boy his special cocktail and pops a cassette into the VCR. Dahmer trips the passed out 14-year-old boy, but then realizes he's out of beer. Dahmer left the Asian boy on the floor for a quick trip to the store. Strolling down 25th Street, a case of beer under his arm, for Dahmer, it was Miller time. At the sight of Dahmer's toy loose and on the street, Dahmer drops the beer and breaks into a run. Dahmer struggled with the two women for possession of his... I'm not reading that. 2 squad cars and a fire engine roll up on the strange scene. 3 policemen speak with Dahmer, mostly ignoring the 2 black women. I thought it was 3 black women actually. The officers escort the man and the boy back to Dahmer's apartment. Jeffrey is all smiles and sorry about the fuss. Dahmer shakes hands with the 2 officers and then they leave. Jeffrey told them that Konarak was his 19-year-old lover and that he was a little drunk, just a lover's quarrel. Dahmer picked up Matt Turner in Chicago at the Gay Pride Parade. The 2 of them hopped on the Greyhound back to Milwaukee. On July 5th, the same ploy worked on Jeremiah Weinberger, a bus ride to Dahmer's torso collection. By Friday, July 19th, Dahmer's lifestyle was beginning to affect him. Dahmer had been fired from his job at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory. On Monday, July 22, 1991, Tracy Edwards is hanging out at the mall with some friends. He had seen Dahmer around the neighborhood before. Dahmer talked the group into going back to his place to suck down some brew. Dahmer and Edwards would pick up the beer and meet with everyone else back at his place. Dahmer gave the rest of the group a false address. When Edwards, father of 6, realized his friends weren't going to show up, he made to leave. Dahmer slapped a handcuff on one wrist and pushed a butcher knife into his chest. Dahmer walked Edwards into his bedroom, where the stench was the foulest. The Exorcist was playing on a TV by the bed. Pictures of mutilated men were tacked to the walls. Dahmer told Edwards that he was going to cut his heart out and eat it. Edwards exploded on his keeper with a flurry of punches and kicks, knocking Dahmer to the floor. Edwards led the police back to the apartment, where Officer Robert Roth and Rolf Mueller forcibly arrested Jeffrey Dahmer. The rest is televised history. And that's it for the Jeffrey Dahmer unofficial biography. Even the name is misspelled on the cover. I don't like the idea of this comic. It was clearly made to shock people and was released at a time where no false jokes or statements should be said. Dahmer was just arrested before this comic came out. I can understand the reason the victims' families were mad at the comic. Detailed drawings of your family members being murdered. Not to mention, it boasts some facts about the case that I've never heard of before. So this is a controversial release, and that's why I had to make a video on it. I'll do the Dahmer movie sometime soon. Check out the house that Jack built to see a psychological guilt trip into Jack and how pretentious he really is. A lot of the murders committed have influences based on real life serial killer encounters. Anyway, thanks for watching this short little video. Like the video if you enjoyed and subscribe to see more messed up stuff. Thanks for watching. Spooky out.